Hello everyone, welcome to another subscriber game review. So finally, someone saw my ad at the beginning of my last review and reached out for a game review. So this is a beginner review, double digit Q 15K versus 14K. But it's actually quite interesting. It's probably a good game to review for all Q players, I would say, unless you're a very advanced Q player, almost done player. Probably don't need this, but there are some good advice that I offer based on what's happening in this game. So once again, if you're watching this video and if you have some games hanging around, you're not sure what happened in the game, just reach out to me. Happy to explain, to do a game review for you as well. So let's dive right into this. So black chooses this Hane Joseki on the corner, which is recommended by AI. So I cover this in my channel. You can find it in chapter 5. So the correct move, usually for white, is just to play on top and take Sente, right? So this way, so relatively simple Joseki to remember. Just give black a base here and white stays on top. And white has Sente, so this is a good way to proceed. Right, so here, white makes a beginner mistake. Or a double-digit mistake, right? Kind of takes the bait and captures number 9. And in this situation, right, there are Josekis where taking a stone here on the second line is valuable, but here it's not. Because white is already alive. White is already over-concentrated here. You don't really need this stone to stay alive. You can choose other Josekis. And also, you're not getting out, right? So there are 2 black stones here that really limits white's access to the lower side. So black is in a very good position here with these 2 stones. So now it's already favoring black. And white really needs to play on the outside. White cannot continue to play on the second line here. Right? You need to play on the outside, and this is only slightly better for black. So in the game, if you follow through, but 16 and 18 is getting worse for white, because these 2 moves are also very inefficient, whereas 17 and 19 are really strengthening black's shape on the outside. So at this point, I think AI is already giving black 80% chance of winning. So you can say this clearly favors black, because white is simply too small, and capturing this stone on the second line is too small. So this is a beginner mistake. You all need to know that this is not the correct way to proceed as white. So number 10 here, number 12 are incorrect moves. So in this situation, white should consider the double Hane, kind of keeping up the pressure a little bit on black. Of course, black will continue playing on the outside, something like this. So white plays here. Now black should probably take Sente or keep pressing here. But of course, 21 here. It's also fine, I think. Not a bad move. The only problem, of course, is that there's going to be a push and cut sometime down the line. Not right away, because now white doesn't have any reinforcement anywhere near here. But sometime down the line, this might be a source of trouble. Right? So if you're a beginner, if you're wondering what's happening to number 2, it's not a ladder, it's a net. Right? This is a net. So that's why it's not viable for white. So white takes a corner this way. And this is a Joseki, which is fine. If you play a Joseki in any of my beginner reviews, it's good. It's good, right? Because at least you're not putting yourself at a disadvantage. So 32 is a little curious because it's a little excessive, right? So this exchange does not benefit white because white is already alive. You don't need this extra crawl on the second line to help save the corner, right? You might be thinking about, let's see, it's the only start point I have left. Right, this Joseki, where white's cross here, number 30, an extra time. This is because it's thinking about the life and death on the corner, right? So it's better to make this exchange first, and then it'll be easier to handle black's harassment here in the corner. I think either this or this, right? But here you don't really need it. And 33 is good, right? It's a big move, but actually AI is saying that the right side is even bigger in this situation. But of course, white will be able to play something like this, right? This double hane to gain access to the upper side. So nothing wrong with 33, I would say. We're still protecting the upper side, building a wall. And white comes in this way. So this is already looking good for black, right? 2 walls, very strong. And white is on the second line here, right? So 35 is fine, right? It's a Joseki move. Now white really needs to extend to the right side, right? This is very important. You cannot come into the corner. So 36 is not a Joseki move. Again, we see a lot of non-Joseki moves in beginner games. That's why beginners need to know the basic Josekis so you don't fall behind in these corner patterns. And that will increase your chances of winning, and that will make the game more fun. Right, so after 36, of course, black is going to protect the corner at 37. And now, if you play the wrong move, technically you need to still take sente and play on the right side. But usually in games, of course, after this move, you want to follow through and save 36. And 38 is very, very slow. Right, these 3 stones, very inefficient. They're just sticking together, very slow. And 39, another slow move for black, right? It's very solid, but very slow. And this is gonna be a pattern we see from black. We're gonna see a couple more moves that are very slow, that are protecting cutting points that don't really exist, right? Here you need to come into the corner, at the very least, you need to come into the corner. But again, given the board is empty, black should consider pincering from the right side, right? And maybe pushing white into the corner like this. And this will be good, right? This will be good for black. So black really needs to have a game plan here. What do you want to do with this white group? Because clearly, white is at a disadvantage. So black needs to play more proactively, more aggressively here. So 39 is simply too slow. So again, white really needs to extend here. And playing 40 and 41, not a good exchange. Really not a good exchange, because this white group is actually really weak. Black is pretty solid, white is actually very weak. So white comes to the lower side. It's a good sense of direction. But the problem with this pattern, right, because white chose the wrong Joseki here, black has this move, this hane on the first line, threatening to take away the ice space here. And now the best white can do is to play this one space extension. And this will be really good for black, right? Because black is mostly settled. And of course, this will be very big endgame move, but white should be able to get out. So white is not afraid of being attacked immediately. Whereas if white chooses this, preserving this one eye, black can play something at 45. And this will be very tough for white. White might even die in this situation, right? This will be very tough because this is only one real eye. So that's why it's a terrible pattern for white. And this Atari is actually very important. White needs to get here, and black needs to get to this hane because it makes a huge difference in the eye shape, right? If black plays here, black has at least one real eye here, threatening to make another real eye, and black has potential here on the left side, left of 39 here to make another real eye. So black is basically alive after 43. And if white plays here, then white is alive. White has the corner here, one real eye, and another real eye somewhere here, right? So it's a really crucial move about life and death. And that's why these moves on the first line is important, right? It's only important when it matters, when it concerns life and death. So AI will keep suggesting these 2 moves for black and white throughout this game. And that's the reason why, because it's really important for life and death. So it's something to be aware of. And generally, this is a big move, right? It's something you should consider when you see this type of situation in games. So 43, a little curious. If I were black, I would just play more solidly, like on the lower side to make sure white doesn't have a base here easily. Like you can jump out all you want. From my perspective, I don't really care if white plays something like this. It's still vulnerable, right? Of course, black can't kill it right away, but it's still vulnerable. It doesn't have anything on the lower side, doesn't have a base. It's only 2 stones. I can just leave it there. I can play whatever I want, can build my own territory here on the right side. I can approach the corner. There's so many things I can do as black, right? And all I need to do is to make sure white can't come into the lower side that easily. And this also reinforces black's lower group. So if I were black, I would just play something like this and allow white to jump out, right? Doesn't really matter. Of course, if your lower side is this wide, right, it's not all yours. Your opponent has a right to come in and jump out. But your opponent is not gaining all that much. It's only destroying kind of a little bit of your territory. And that should be allowed, right? A lot of beginners, Q players think you can't come out or you can't come in, right? If you come in, I'm going to try to kill the whole group. So 43 is aggressive. AI actually doesn't dislike this move, but if you play this closely to your opponent, then it's actually very easy for your opponent to settle. So 48 is a solid move. There's at least, I guess, 1 ROI here, and white can still move out, right? So black takes Sente here, and this, in my opinion, not as good as just taking away white's roots on the lower side, right? But this is okay, right? Taking Sente is almost always good when the board is empty, right? Especially if it's approach. So 50 is a slow move, right? Again, so white doesn't seem to know a lot of Josekis here, but as we'll see, white is probably more experienced in fighting. So this is a slow move. Black needs to come in, and white can only honey from this side. If it honeys from this side, black will cut. It will not turn out well for white. So white will honey here, black extends. The corner territory is almost gone for white, right? And white probably still owes a move here or here. But of course, in this situation, you can play on the left side as well. And black will have harsher moves here against white. So this is not a good shape. It's simply too slow. If you play here, it's over-concentrated. So that's why number 50 is really no longer a viable Joseki for white. Simply too slow. And black needs to come into the 3-3 point at 51, playing this attachment. So in the game, black played here first. So white should really try to preserve the corner. Right? If it's something like this, then 51 will be the move that's over-concentrated. Well, white played here. A little questionable, but it's okay. I think what white is trying to do is preventing 21 and 51 to connect. Right? If black connects here, then there'll be another wall. So I think that's what white is trying to do. And white jumps out. So white is concerned about black connecting. So at this point, black clearly has the lead. Right? So black is playing very solidly. Black has great potential on the upper right side. And black has a base here. So black is mostly alive. But once again, this is very important, especially with these 2 moves, 3 moves out here. White is really vulnerable here. So black needs to go on the offensive and keep up the lead. What ends up happening here is that both sides play some confusing moves. So 57 is okay, right? If you want to reinforce the upper side, it's okay. But I'm not worried about the upper side, because if you play something on the outside taking Sente, white can't really do anything. This is the best white can do. But because white owes a move here, black will have very good eye space on the corner, right? Or something like this. White is really vulnerable. So I'm not worried about black, this black group, right? Because white is still vulnerable and black has pretty good eye space, pretty good shape, right? So this is where you need to consider what are my weak groups and what are my opponent's weak groups and what can I do, right? If there are no weak groups, then you should start building, right, on the right side here as black. If there are weak groups, you have to take care of it. But here, black really doesn't have any weak groups. Maybe here, it's a little weak. But of course, if you play something like this, then black is no longer weak. And obviously the weakest group for white is this corner group. The second weakest is right here, right? This lower group. Black can still at least prevent white from having two real eyes on the lower side, kind of forcing white to come out, right? And of course, there's another weak group, and that's these three stones on the upper left corner, right? So white has these weak groups, and now what black needs to do is put pressure on these groups. So that's why 57 is a little too slow, right? You're too conservative. And that's where we see that white is more experienced in fighting, right? So 58, pretty aggressive. I don't know exactly what it's trying to do. It's kind of putting some pressure on black's wall, or what used to be a wall. But black still pretty solid. I wouldn't worry about it. So 59 is trying to disconnect these two groups. It's an okay move. And 60, right, is trying to connect. And 61, 63, a little questionable. It's not necessarily a good shape for black, but it's okay. It's pretty aggressive, so I like the aggression here, but may or may not be the correct way. So 64, right? So it's really trying to build a base here. Now it's probably hard for black to prevent white from having two eyes because the eye space on the lower side is simply too big. And now what's happening is that there's actually this weakness in black's shape. White can actually push and cut because this cut is a tari, and there's no way black can capture these two white stones. So black will be cut off. Black will eventually need to build another real eye here, and white will probably take care of these three stones on the outside. And this is all of a sudden looking good for white. So black is simply playing too slow, a little too slow. And white, if white were sharper, white would have found this move. Right? So something you should see. So white connects here, very solid again, but very, very slow because it's basically dame. Yeah, right? Usually when your opponent peeks, threatening to cut, and you connect to prevent the cut, this connection is usually a very, very slow move. So you should consider alternatives, counterattacks, before you play this move. But of course, I understand for beginners, many Q players, it's hard to form a counterattack. So it's okay if you play this move. But if you're a dam player, you have to consider counterattacks. You can't just play a move that does not gain you any points. So 67, good, right? Taking care of this potential push and cut. 68, really curious, because this is really just inviting black to atari here and pushing, right? Pushing through here. 56 is cut off. White's shape is a mess here, right? It might be something like this. And this is very bad for white because, once again, black has a very solid shape. So this is where black needs to follow through, right? Instead, black protected this cutting point. And it's another cutting point that does not need protecting. So here, black might be afraid of this cutting point, which might make a little bit of sense. But I'm trying to see. Black might be able to play this, but of course, white can cut this way. Might be something like this, right? Or black can just connect here. If white connects this way, black can, again, cut off 56. And now this cut does not exist, right? This way, white will be dead. There's nothing white can do on the outside. White can connect this way. Black can just play on the outside. Once again, preventing white from coming out. And there's going to be this push and cut, right? If white doesn't play here, black can just cut here and capture these stones. So this is going to be great for black. White cannot capture 77 because black can atari here, capture these 4 stones. So either way, it's going to be disastrous for white. So white still owes a move here. And this is going to be a good way for black to proceed, right? Black can keep playing towards the center, beating a wall here, kind of enclosing white. And this cutting point just simply does not exist. You have to calculate. You have to calculate what happens after your opponent cuts. You can't just assume that every cut is going to be lethal. It's going to be very bad for you. That's simply not the case here. Right. So 71 is simply too slow. You have to follow through with a connection at least, if not the push. So after all this sequence, white actually takes the lead, right? Because black gained very little. If you look at all the sequence from 61 or from 57, black gained very little here. And white has played 64 valuable. White has solidified the shape on the left side here, and white is coming out. So white has done a lot of things in the past 15 moves, 20 moves, but black has gained very little. So this is actually starting to tilt toward white, but this game is actually far from over. So 80, questionable move, right? Really funny move. I'm not sure what it's trying to do. Is it trying to reduce black? But black is pretty small here. Black doesn't have a lot going on. Is it trying to attack black? No, not really. Black is already alive, right? This shape, it's already territory. It's more than just ice space. It's already territory. So it's a curious move, and it doesn't really take care of white's own weakness here. You have to know these three stones are very weak. Black has this clamping move, all kinds of moves here. Probably this clamping move is probably the best. So number 80 is questionable, very questionable. And again, if you're black, what should you do? See if you have weak groups? Not really. This is already alive. This is clearly alive. Does white have weak groups? And the answer is yes. Still two weak groups. I wouldn't call this lower group a weak group because white's mostly settled here. But white still has this corner. These four stones are relatively weak. And these four stones on the lower right corner are still relatively weak. So that's when black really needs to go on the offensive. That's what you should consider. And instead, we have 81 here, protecting against another cutting point that doesn't do anything, right? So theoretically, of course, white can cut. And you might see, oh, this ladder doesn't work, right? Can't kill it. But it doesn't do anything. Cutting is only aggressive or even lethal, right? When it kills a group, or it threatens to attack a group. But here, right, if white cuts here, it doesn't do anything because both black groups are alive. This group is alive, and this group is alive. So this group, this move is basically wasted, right? This is a wasted move. And that is why black doesn't need to be afraid of this cut. And that's something you need to consider, right? Do I need to protect a cut? If my opponent cuts, and I can't kill it, I cannot kill the cutting stone, and this cutting stone is splitting my groups into two, and at least one of the two groups will have trouble living, then you need to protect against the cut. But if your opponent cuts, and if you can kill the cutting stone, doesn't matter. So the cut doesn't really exist, right? Or if it cuts, you can't kill, but both groups are already alive. You're not under any pressure, then the cutting is useless, right? This cutting is basically useless. You cut to attack, to kill, but here this cut doesn't do anything. And that is why black does not need to protect this cut. So black is basically a wasted move, 81 right here. So white takes the opportunity to reinforce the upper side. So once again, this is where black needs to take sente, move your eyes off of your opponent's previous move, as I would say here on my channel. Board is still pretty empty here. Should do something on the right side, upper right side. Even if you didn't spot that you can attack, go on the attack against this group. Right? So 83 again, very slow. 84, right? Moving out, kind of reducing black's influence here. 85 is good, even though it's not really trying to kill white as black should, but it's kind of enclosing white, right? Gaining more influence here on the lower right quadrant. So it's not bad. And this is where, double-digit Q players don't play particularly well. 87 is okay, but 88 could be a headache, right? Could be a headache. This is the correct move because 89 is not sente. You're not threatening to cut off these two stones. And white can play something like this. So white is already alive. White pushes, ataris, and there'll be cutting points, right? It's potential weaknesses in black's shape. So it's not necessarily a good shape for black. But in the game, white played here. And white plays here, you should connect, right? Connecting is the correct move. Just like 5, 7, and 11. It's a very solid move. White just can't come in. You have the right side sealed off, right? So it's a very solid move. Whereas if you play at 89, once again, white has all kinds of moves, and black has this cutting point as a potential weakness. So 89, not great. And of course, this attachment, good move. And what ended up happening is that here, you need to be really careful. You have a cutting point here, it's black. And it's double Atari too. So the best black can do is probably this, right? Not great. But again, black should take Sente and surround as much as possible on the right side. Right? Just get Sente here and surround the right side. But here we have a miscalculation, and that's really lethal. White gets to this double Atari, and white captures. So now it's already 99% chance of winning for white, right? So this is already looking great for white. So what happens next is that this game is actually far from over. So at this point, if you're white, you should calculate, right? You just gained a lot. You basically have the whole corner, which is huge, right? More than 20 points here, plus probably 10 points here. So this is already more than 30 points. And that's huge. And you have the corner, you have this corner, another 20 points almost. And black, what does black have? Black had a wall here, but it's less than 10 points. Black has a base here, it's a little more than 10 points. And that's it for black. Black really needs to build up the right side. And if you're white, what should you do? All you need to do is make sure that black doesn't get too big, right? But this game, again, is far from over, because what ended up happening, I'm not going to go into details about each of these moves, is that white's invaded too deep. You don't need to invade deep when you're leading by this much, right? So what should white have done? Right? Just play the big endgame moves. This is very big. You're threatening to kind of jump in here, right? This will greatly reduce black's territory on the side. Right? Start from the side, threatening to reduce the side. And this Hanea connect, very big, because you're threatening this kind of move. It could be really annoying and problematic. If black really wants to kill you, it needs to play something like this, and that will have all kinds of problems. You can cut here, potentially. Moves like this threatening the cut. Well, of course, you need more calculation, but this is a start, right? This is a very good start, and you're preserving your corner territory. And if you want to play from the left side, just jump. Right? These two stones are pretty weak. You have so many ways to just jump in and try to reduce black's territory. And white will be able to win pretty easily at this point, because white is leading by a lot, especially after capturing the corner here. Right? So this is what white should have done. Right? You shouldn't get greedy. If you come in, then of course black is not going to let you live comfortably. It's trying to kill you, right? So black, good, going for the kill. And white is jumping out. Black is kind of preventing white from coming out. And at this point, white should probably Atari this way, right? So that's why white 19 is probably an overplay. And this way, I think white should be able to live, right? Something like this. White should have no trouble making two eyes. If you try this, it's going to be the same. White actually will be able to live. So 119 is an overplay. 120 is the wrong move, right? But even so, I don't think white has lost that much, right? White can still kind of cut its losses here and try to move out. But that's not what happened, right? So good move, right? Black just like enclosed all of white. It's a fake eye here. 134 doesn't work, right? Because these two stones would just be captured. Will this push work? I don't think so, right? So White's pattern is actually a mess all of a sudden. This is not going to work. It can't really come out. So white is dead all of a sudden. And it's by this much. By this much. It's huge. But just imagine any of these moves on the outside reducing black, right? White ended up getting none of these big moves that I pointed out, right? And white is all dead all of a sudden. So this is not a risk you should take at this point of the game. Just do a quick overview of the points, right? If you're white in this situation, you already have the lead, especially after your opponent makes a mistake. Just calculate how much of a lead you have, and just reduce whatever influence your opponent has. That should be the approach. But here, white got too greedy, and of course, poor calculation, especially after 119. And black is winning again, all of a sudden. But again, this game is not over. So if you're playing as white, it's already dead. Just don't play 146. Doesn't help. It's on the first line. It doesn't beat you any eyes. And black is still playing on the outside. So that's good. But the only problem with 147 is that it's sacrificed for nothing, right? It's sacrificed for nothing. So you should calculate a little more carefully, especially after 148, 150. This stone is already swallowed, right? 151 is not doing anything. But as long as your opponent answers, it's okay. You know, lose a point at least. 153, good. Endgame move. And here, this is big, right? This is always a big move. Just like here on the corner. This 2-1 point is big. This is big. 2-2, 2-1. This is a big point. 155 is okay, right? You're threatening this cut. 157. So this is where you shouldn't play 157 first. Now, white is connected. White can play it this way. And 155 is probably better here, I think. Connecting is okay too. So 166, not really how you should try to save your group, right? You should play on the inside. So black is in the lead, but it's actually still fairly close for a beginner game. And what happens is that, so if you're black, you have to calculate if your opponent is just wasting moves. This is very important for beginners, right? Can your opponent live if you take Sente, play something big on the outside? No. White doesn't have anything. White has 0 VOIs. This will only give white 1. And it's still Gote. It's not still threatening nothing. And white still can't live after 170. So that's why you need to take Sente. Your opponent is wasting moves, right? So 171, these are all just wasted. 173, it's okay, but you have to follow through. You can't just play this move and allow your opponent to capture it. This is not how you should play the endgame, right? So a few endgame lessons here, especially for black. You should not play stones that just get captured, right? 147 is an example. We'll see a couple more, actually. So 176 is here. 177, right? It's really just giving up all these stones. Giving up these 2 stones for nothing. You're gaining nothing. And that's a huge problem for black. This is not how you should approach endgame. You have to consider, am I just giving my opponents these stones for nothing? These are territory. These are points. Really, really important. You're not winning by that much at this point. And again, 182, 183, right here, this connection. Do you need to connect? Is there anything going on here? It's just an Atari. No, there's nothing white can do after this cut. So that's why black is again wasting another move here. Right, really, really important. 184, very small. This is only 2 points, capturing this stone. And are there moves that are bigger than 2 points? Yes, any of these moves are bigger than 2 points. This could even be bigger, right? So very, very small. 186, also very, very small, 2 points. And 187, this is where the winning probably tilts toward white again. Overplay. Why? Because this double Atari, right? Double Atari, and white can just capture on the outside. And white is actually winning at this point because black has simply sacrificed too many of its own stones. After black made the kill, black was winning. But after black sacrificed its own stones toward the end game for nothing. Black is losing again. So now Black is losing again. But what ended up happening is that White resigned after this, right? So if you're already dead, you don't push from the inside because 220 will be captured, right? Instead, you should push from the outside. Now 220 is not being captured. You're reducing Black. So White is desperate. White didn't really count properly. Still fairly close, but White is obviously winning by at least 5 points at this point after Comey. And White resigned. So resigning a winning game, it's not... It has happened before, even in professional games. I believe many, many years ago, more than 2 decades ago, there was a game where I think a Chinese player, he resigned because his big group got killed. But if he had played on, he would have won by a little bit. But he just gave up. He didn't calculate. So another lesson for beginners, I guess, is don't resign. Just if you're already at this stage, play it until the end, see what happens. And don't just assume that you're losing because you lost a group, because that is not true. Because in professional games, as you can see, sometimes one player might lose a big group, but they might still win because they either capture their opponents, a smaller group of their opponents, right? Or they have a big territory elsewhere on the board. So in this case, actually, White is winning, so you can't just assume because your whole big group died, you're losing. That's not how the game works. The game works on counting points. You have to count each point and see how everything adds up. So hopefully there has been at least one lesson for every beginner here, especially for our subscriber here, playing Black. And as always, if you're interested in having your own game reviewed, please just reach out. Best of luck to you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.